Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we will be reviewing the Los Chorros wash processed Colombia from Oma Coffee Roasters. And there's the bag right there. And Oma, based out of Tai Hang, Hong Kong. And this is surprisingly only their 5th ever appearance on this channel, as it honestly feels like we've reviewed a lot more of their coffees. When I did find out that Airworks was bringing them back in, I immediately took a look through their catalog, as they've definitely offered some interesting coffees in the past, and this one was no exception, as we've made it a point to review a lot more ahi coffees. So when I saw this one, it immediately caught my interest, and it'll definitely be interesting to see how it turned out, as this right here is day 40. And recipe we went with for this coffee was our standard recipe at a 16:1 water to coffee ratio, brewed at 96 degrees Celsius, about 205 degrees Fahrenheit. And I like this one best through the V60, which does indicate a more medium fine grind. Roast profile for this coffee. In our previous Oma reviews, we've mentioned that they have been a little lighter than a lot of the Nordic-based coffee roasters that we do review on the channel, and this one is no exception. And in comparison to the only other Hong Kong-based contemporary that we've reviewed on this channel, which is of course Red Meow, you can see that these coffees are significantly lighter than those ones as well, and still a bit lighter than the vast majority of Asian-based coffee roasters that we do review on this channel as well. So for that reason, we can say that it is on the more light side, if not necessarily extremely light, still on the lighter side by most standards and metrics. With all that out of the way, let's go and start discussing this coffee. Day 23, first impression, and we did opt for the V60, and the coffee is off to a nice start, as it's definitely offering an abundance of fruit qualities in a clear and pronounced sense, with plenty of the listed peachiness and citric florality in line with the listed orange blossom. Outside of that, there's a nice refreshing fruit tartness, as it offers great sweetness and intensity right from the onset. So I was quite pleased with the way that this coffee turned out, as in the past, the ahi coffees that I've enjoyed the most have been the ones that are very fruit forward. And this one was no exception, even if it did offer a little bit more of a tart fruit forward experience. Day 26 through the Chemex, and the coffee is not quite as impressive today, as it's offering a bit more brightness than the previous day. That's much more in line with the listed tart characteristics of this coffee. Otherwise, there are some slight traces of stone fruit, but generally a fair bit more citric intense this time around, which I can give or take the citric qualities to a coffee almost all the time, so having it skew a little bit more in that direction wasn't necessarily ideal for me. Day 29 through the UFO brewer, and the coffee is better this time, as there's still a lot of the prominent tart fruit qualities to it, especially as the coffee does cool down. But it's also offering plenty of a candied sweetness, giving the entire thing a tart lemon raspberry candy feel. And in addition to that, there's a little bit of a butterscotch-like characteristic to it, so there are definitely a fair bit of positives to this one, even if it does continue to skew a little bit more tart than I would necessarily enjoy. Day 32 through the V60 with Oma's recipe, which is a 15:1 at 92 degrees Celsius recipe. And the coffee is a bit more unusual today, as there's even more tartness to the coffee, which goes against what I would have expected based off of the adjustments. But off brew, there was a surprisingly nice peachiness, but the coffee cooled down into an extremely tart experience. So it's entirely possible that there was some sort of brewing error that happened, but I was really surprised to see just how heavily tart this coffee was on this day. So not necessarily my favorite. I'm going to move on to day 35, as we opted for the Chemex with the same adjustments, and the coffee does continue to be slightly inconsistent, with more of the brightness focused experience and plenty of the listed lemon and raspberry tartness at the forefront. There's a little bit more of that citric floral depth, and outside of that, traces of some peach as the coffee does cool down. But for the most part, this was essentially a very strong stone fruit lemonade experience, with a heavy emphasis on the brighter, more tart lemon qualities. Day 37 through the V60 with our standard recipe, so that was the best results we had. We went back to it, and to my surprise, this coffee was at its best when we pushed it essentially to our standard level, as it does seem to accentuate more of the, I would say, desired for myself fruit characteristics, especially the stone fruit qualities. It does keep the tartness also toned down, so there are times where you have an idea of the way that a coffee is going to act. So in theory, the more you push this coffee, the more you'd expect the citric qualities, the brightness to really shine, and maybe a little less of the peach characteristics. But no, it goes against conventional wisdom, and it does seem to balance out the rest of this coffee more so than I might expect, as there's a surprisingly nice jasmine quality to go with the citric blossom, and more of that butterscotch candied quality as well. All right, let's go ahead and put up the tasting wheel so you can see what we're getting. And I am curious now. I want to see how it compares to I got sidetracked here. I want to see how it compares to one of the other ahi coffees that, very, very similar. Okay. So let's take a look at the tasting wheel. We have quite a few level 4s, and let's go through those. I think the tasting wheels are actually the exact same. Well, we'll start with the cleanliness level 4. Yeah, this coffee was very clean, and even though it was a little inconsistent and all over the board at times, it, by the end, was definitely pretty well defined in a lot of the characteristics that we were able to pull out from this one. This one's extremely direct. You don't really have to think too far outside of the box to pick up a lot of the qualities in this one, as they're pretty well defined throughout the entirety, even if they are skewing in one specific direction or another. But very clean coffee, especially for a Colombian coffee. If anything, now that I think about it, it's lacking that heavier berry quality that is very common in so many Colombian coffees, but I've noticed it's not quite as common when it comes to wash-processed ahi Colombian coffees, so that's a very nice experience for us. Let's go ahead and move on to the finish, level 4. One of my favorite parts of this coffee, especially given that it has that interesting candied quality, and I do believe they roast on alluring. I think it actually says on the bag itself that they roast on alluring, so it's rare for me to get this sort of candied experience from too many alluring-based coffee roasters, so anytime I am able to get it, I'm very happy with the way that it presents in the coffee, so credit to Oma on this one for that. Sweetness level 4. The sweetness is excellent. I've already mentioned that candied sweetness to it, but there's also great fruit sweetness in this one, which is everything that I can hope for altogether. So level 4, where we opted to put that on the sweeter side with great cleanliness for a wash process Colombian coffee. That's definitely going to be a win for me. Acidity level 4. It might be a little generous, but given the very strong tartness of this coffee and brightness of the lemon qualities and characteristics, it is a little higher than I would necessarily prefer. But as I always say, if the sweetness is in at least equal measure to, if not more than the acidity, then I'm still happy with the way that it turned out. And it's a little sweeter than it is bright most of the time. There were a handful of the days when we kept the extraction a little lower that the brightness seemed to skew a little heavier, which again is counterintuitive and doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's coffee sometimes. Florality level 4. There's plenty of these citric floral qualities to it, so level 4 might be a little generous if I'm being completely honest. The fruit characteristics were significantly more abundant for me. I do believe that orange blossom is the first note that they have listed on here nonetheless. Berry fruit level 4, there's plenty of the raspberry characteristic to it, and it definitely presents in a very tart raspberry quality. So level 4 where we opted to put that. Citrus fruit level 4, I don't think there's really too much to add to that. It's extremely lemon tart forward, and there's also plenty of a grapefruit characteristic to it, so plenty of citrus in this one. Stone fruit level 4, extremely happy with as much peachiness as I was able to get out from this coffee. And I'm going to take a very quick look because I don't remember if they actually had any peach. They do have peach note list on here. Okay. So yes, that would make a lot of sense then. Level 4 where we opted to put that. And then just a couple of level 3s. First one we have is the caramel level 3. I mentioned that pretty strong butterscotch-like quality to it, which is something I was certainly not expecting to this coffee, but it definitely added some nice depth and candied characteristics to it. And then the final thing worth discussing, body level 3. There's plenty of texture to this one. I'm kind of thinking about the other ahi coffee that we're working on, and it's interesting to me that that one also scored a level 3 for the body. So I think if I'm picking up a couple of things from these ahi coffees, it's that they can be a little less heavy than the average Colombian coffee. They can have a little bit more body overall and can be a bit more candied and fruit forward, which are all things that I would definitely enjoy in these coffees. So yeah, as I'm looking at this tasting wheel, I do think it is a pretty good representation of what I was getting from this coffee. All right, so my overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee. I was quite happy with this when I was able to get it at its best days. Now, the days where this coffee was super tart or super citric wasn't necessarily my favorite. I've said it over and over that that's not my favorite quality or characteristic when it comes to most coffees anyway, but on the days where it's a little bit more of that candied forward, peach forward experience, and it's very enjoyable. And I wouldn't say that I enjoyed it as much as the other ahi coffee that we were working on, but it was actually pretty close. I would say that when it comes to ahi coffees overall, it's probably safe to say that this is one of my 5 favorites. Granted, we haven't reviewed that many ahi coffees, but I can't think of anything other than the Jose Salazar, the La Reserva, that I've necessarily enjoyed more than this one when it comes to ahi coffees. So they're definitely growing on me, and I'm going to continue to seek them out largely because it's a varietal in Colombia that I seem to have much greater than average success with, so I'll definitely be keeping an eye out for them in the future. The type of person I would suggest this coffee to, I feel like if you've had good experiences with Ahi coffees as well, then this one's going to be a pretty good fit because it does continue to remain in line with the experiences that I've had from them. They tend to be sweeter, cleaner, a bit more fruit forward, and definitely plenty of candied qualities to them, all of which are things that I'm looking for in a coffee. But in addition to that, this one can be adjusted to the point where you get something different out of it. It can be a lot more tart, a lot more citric, a lot more bright as well. So you can kind of pick and choose what you want to get out of this coffee. That's kind of the best direction I can point somebody towards on this one, and also the best way I can leave this review. If you by chance had an opportunity to try this coffee, I'd love to hear your thoughts and impressions of it as well. If you're enjoying the content, give this video a like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. This right here has been a review of the Los Chorros wash processed Colombia from Oma Coffee Roasters. Thank you for watching.